Alright, in this video here we're going to talk about functions, the definition of a function, what a function is, and then we'll also talk about the domain and range of a function and what the definitions of those are. Alright, so first off, the definition of what a function is. A function is a really important thing in mathematics. A lot of the things that you do in algebra and precalculus and calculus are based on functions. So a lot of the things that you use in those courses are functions. So it's important to know what a function actually is. All right, so a function f is a rule that assigns to each element x in a set A exactly one element, which we call f of x, in a set B. All right, so just to kind of unpack that definition, we have two sets, right? And I have a couple of diagrams up here to show you what's really going on here. So we have a set A, right? That contains all of our input values, the things that we put into the function, right? And then we have another set over here, B, which contains all of the output values, the numbers that come out of a function, right? So basically what a function does is you put a number into it, it does some type of operation, some type of calculations with that number, and then it spits out this other number, which we call the output, which is that f of x in the set B, right? So the x values, those are our input values. So we take some number x into the function adds 3 to that number, and then spits out the result, which is what we call f of x from this other set. Or we put a number into the function, and the function takes the square root of that number and then multiplies it by 5 and then subtracts 17. Right? That's another function. Right? So a function does something to a number. Okay? And again, we have a set of input values and we have a set of output values. The input values we call x, the output values we call f of x, and the function we call f. Right? So when we see this f of x, or that f with the x in parentheses, that doesn't mean f times x, right? That means f of x, right? So x, whatever's in that parentheses, is what we call the input value for the function. F of x is the value that we get when we plug that x value into the function. What's the output? Right? That's what f of x is. All right, so the key term or the key words here in the definition of what makes something a function as opposed to what's not a function, I kind of double underlined here, exactly one, right? So f is a rule that assigns to each element x exactly one element called f of x. Right? So in order for something to be a function, when you plug a number into it, only one single number can come out. Right? That's what it says, exactly one comes out. Right? So if I put a number into the function, or if I put a number into my rule, and 2 numbers can come out, or 3 or 4 different numbers come out of it, then it's not a function. Right? It's still a mathematical rule, it's just not a function, right? So it doesn't fit that definition of a function, right? So for a function, one number goes in, one number comes out, right? If one number goes in and more than one number comes out, it's not a function, right? So that's the little technical thing that what makes something a function. All right, so this first diagram that I put up here, we have the set A, all our input values. We have 1, 2, and 3. We have the other set over here, B, of our output values. We have 5 and 4. I just randomly threw some numbers in there. It doesn't really have any meaning other than just showing you an example of what a function does look like, right? So in this arrow diagram that we call it, right? So we have the input value 1. My function f takes that number and changes it to a 5, right? So one number goes in, a 1, out comes a 5. One number in, one number out, that's okay. Right? I take the input value of 2, my function changes the 2 into a 4. Right? I take the input value of 3, my function changes that 3 also to a 4. Right? So that is a function because for each single input value, like when I plug into 3, I only get one output, a 4. Right? When I plug into 2, I only get one single output, a 4. Right? It's okay that I get the same output from both 2 and 3. Right? A function, when you have a function, two different inputs are allowed to have the same output, right? 2 different x's are allowed to have the same f of x, right? So that's still a function, right? Because when I plug in 2, I only get one result, and that's a 4 every time. When I plug in a 3, I only get one result, and that's 4 every single time, right? It doesn't matter that those two match. When I plug in 3, I only get one answer. That's a function, right? So this example over here is a function, right? The one I put over here is not a function. Right? When I have the input value of 1, well, it gets mapped over here to an output of 1, but the 1 also gets mapped to an output of 2. So for that one single input value, for that one single x value, I actually have 2 different output values, a 1 and a 2. Therefore, this entire relation here is not a function. All right, so that's the difference. And sometimes looking at it in terms of that arrow diagram helps to see what's a function and what's not. Right, two different input values can go to the same output. That's still a function, but when one input goes to two different outputs, right, when it kind of it diverges and it can go either way. The one either goes to a 1 or a 2. It's not a function. Right, that's what this exactly 1 up here in the definition is referring to. For one input, only one single output. All right, that's the definition of what a function is. All right. Now, the domain and the range of a function. Pretty simple concepts. What the domain of a function is, it's the set of all of the input values for the function. Right. So if I take every single number that I plug into the function, all of those together, that entire set is what we call the domain of the function. Right. So for this function up here, right, the domain is this set A. The numbers 1, 2, and 3. That's the domain of that function. Those are the input values that I plug into the function. Right. The range of the function is the set of all the output values for the function. Right. So for this function again up here, the range is the set B, which contains all the output values, the 4 and the 5. Right. That would be the range of the function. Right. So the range isn't just like just the 4 or just the 5. It's all of the numbers in the outputs. Right. The domain is all of the numbers in the inputs. All right. So I did a video a while back about finding the domain of an algebraic expression, and I'll do some more talking about finding the domain of a function. I'm not going to do that here. This one we're just talking about the definition of a function, the definition of domain and range, but I'll do another video where I get more in depth into how to find the domain of a function and how to express the domain of a function and what notation to use and stuff like that. Right? But the key thing is just knowing which one is which. Right? The domain is the inputs, the range is the outputs. A simple way to remember it goes in alphabetical order, right? D comes before R in the alphabet. I comes before O, right? Input before output. So it follows that same basic order. Again, it's kind of simplistic, but it works if you have trouble remembering which one is the domain and which one is the range, right? Domain is the input. The range is the set of all the outputs, all right? And remember, for something to be a function, for each input value, it can only have a single output, right? The single output can be the same for two different input values, but when we have, like over here, one input with two different outputs, that's not a function. All right, so that's a little bit about what the definition of a function is. And like I said, I'll do some more videos, talking about the domain and range. We'll do some where we evaluate functions. So if you're looking for how to evaluate a function, I'll do another video on that one as well. So make sure you check those out.